Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you had a good weekend. Yesterday, not a good game for the Browns again as they fall to the Chiefs in Cleveland 21-7. And we start with this. Jameis Winston is failing his 2025 Browns audition with flying colors. 3 more interceptions against the Chiefs. Jameis Winston has now thrown 12 interceptions on the season. That's tied for third most in the NFL, and he's only played in 7 games. Let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can check him out on brownzone.com. Scotty, as I watch Jameis Winston, I think he's playing himself back into the role as one of the top backups in the NFL.
Yeah, you know what, Dave? It's really crazy because the offense was no doubt energized by his presence, and we saw that time and again. And then, he's had a big game in Denver. Even though he threw the 3 picks, I thought that was encouraging. The 497, the 4 touchdowns, and then to throw 2 last week and then 3 on Sunday. I went from thinking he had a chance to come back as the bridge starter to now I think he's probably benched for the rest of the year, doesn't return, and winds up a backup somewhere else. So it's just crazy how things can change in this league and things get going the wrong way. It's hard to stop them. And obviously his whole career as a quarterback in this league, throwing as many interceptions as he has, plays a big part in this. But my thought on this whole thing has changed about 180 degrees over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and think in terms of what receivers have looked like with him. Jerry Jeudy's still playing pretty well. I'm with you, though, Scott. After watching Jameis Winston for a few games, this appears to be kind of the perfect description of it. The deep ball is there, and then on the one side, and the other one is do something reasonable. And I say that jokingly. He has a lot of arm talent. That's why the receivers look so good. But man, that sometimes just take the easy throw. He doesn't seem to be willing to take easy throws.
Yeah, not enough. He has. There's simply, he throws out routes. He dumps it off every once in a while. He tried to dump it off to Chubb at the start of the third quarter, and it wasn't a great pass, and it goes off Chubb's hands. But you can explain away some of them, but you just can't explain away the volume of the interceptions. And to me, that's the biggest problem. And, he talks over and over about it's making the right decision. Once I make the right decision, then it's out of my hands. But the throw to Moore, like they're talking about with that meme, it was clear the Browns wanted to take a shot there. They go with an extra offensive lineman. They kind of max protect. But then the quarterback has to determine if the shot is there. And he just missed. He said he missed the second safety. And I don't know if the guy did a great job, like was near the line of scrimmage to go sprinting back. But he was certainly there when the ball was on its way, and there were 2 guys with little Elijah Moore running between them. So it's just a terrible play, and it's in their territory. It takes potential points off the board. And when you have that happen, then you can explain away the Chubb one, and maybe even explain away the third one, which he's still trying to, it felt like, force the ball to Mike Woods on a one-on-one situation. It's still 3, and at least one of them was a terrible decision.
So Kevin Stefanski met with me today. Wasn't ready to talk about who the starting quarterback for the Bengals would be. What would you do? What do you expect him to do? What would you do?
Yeah, I think they're going to go to DTR. If they wanted to go to Bailey Zappi, I would listen to that argument too. We haven't seen him with the Browns. He started 8 games with the Patriots, and in 22 and 23. I just think when Stefanski makes that move in the game against the Chiefs, that signals that he's done seeing Winston throw interceptions. Right? He can no longer tolerate that. So I think he's going to make the move. I would understand it if you want to take a look at DTR. I don't think you need to take a look at DTR. I think we kind of know who he is. But if you're gonna, 3-11 is the right time to do that. Having said that, I think there is an argument to be made for sticking with Winston despite the interceptions. And you mentioned it, the receivers look like real receivers when they didn't in the first 7 games with Watson at quarterback. Jerry Jeudy now looks like a legitimate number one in the league, and nobody would have said that 7 games in. He gets to 1,000 yards, has 11 catches yesterday. Elijah Moore has shown up. Cedric Tillman, before the concussion, showed up. When Winston is out there, at least I feel like this offense can move the ball. There's a potential to score points. They're going down to play Joe Burrow and the Bengals. They're going to need to score points to win that game. And I haven't seen DTR do that nearly enough to say, yeah, he gives them a chance. So I think you look at Winston, goes, at least he gives us a chance. It might be a disaster. And there is also, to me, I don't know how much weight you want to give this, but the guys play hard for Winston, and they've rallied around him, and he's certainly one of the top leaders on this team. So I think that can be part of the decision as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and I'm with you. I think when you replace a guy late in the game, it's still a 2-score game. You're kind of saying we're moving to. I think they're moving to DTR as well. Unfortunately, Nick Chubb had his season come to an early end, broken foot, so he will miss the rest of the season.
With Nick, do you know if he's going to need surgery?
I don't know that just yet. Yeah, so I don't believe so.
Okay, in like recovery time, do you know how long?
Yeah, I don't want to. It's a shorter term recovery time, but obviously you're going to lose him for the season.
Right. And just with him, Kevin, did you see? I know it's such a tough knee injury, but did you see signs of him kind of rounding into the form that we're so used to seeing as the season went along?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly you saw Nick had some really big plays for us this season. Think about some of the runs near the goal line where he put his head down and powered through, including in the games where he just got back out there. So I can't say it enough how impressive it was to watch him get back for this season. Going all the way back, I still have the video of him running the hills at the Greenbrier.
And Scott, that was you obviously asking questions of Coach Stefanski. It'll be interesting to see. I would assume they bring Nick Chubb back. They try to bring him back on an incentive-laden contract, but you're kind of starting to see running backs, like offensive linemen, they do not age gracefully in the NFL.
Yeah, some of them don't. I mean, Derrick Henry's doing pretty well, But yeah, there's certainly the exception. Now, I don't know if it's fair to judge Nick on however many games he played this year. Whatever it was, 7 games, 6 games, because he was coming off that knee injury, and it was a devastating knee injury. So I think it's more about the injuries than it is just the age, and I'm sure that they at some point go hand in hand, right? But I think you want to bring him back if you're the Browns. I think he deserves to come back. Joe Bitonio, I thought, said it best yesterday after the game, that if Nick Chubb wants to come back, he deserves to come back. I don't think he's going to ask for an extraordinary amount of money. He took the restructured deal this year. I think you could offer him the same deal next year, and I think he would accept it. He wants to be here. There's not going to be a market anywhere else that I could see. Then you have to figure out the rest of that room. Jerome Ford has another year on his contract. Can you go in with those 2 guys as your 1-2? If you don't know about Nick, right? If you don't know if Nick can get back to where he was, I think you need to add to that pile. So could it be a rookie, Ford, and Chubb? Yeah, maybe that works. And then if Nick Chubb turns into Nick Chubb, you hit the mother load. You hit the jackpot. So I think they have to work it out. They have so many roster questions. They have to manage the cap so well, given the Deshaun Watson commitments. But I think they'll do it. I think they'll do everything they can to bring Nick Chubb back because he means so much to this organization.
All right, so after the loss to the Chiefs, ESPN Cleveland, Tony Rizzo, his thought of the state of the Browns.
Stefanski's a good coach, but maybe he's not the coach for this team. This team seems to need a butt kicker. A Tomlin, a Campbell. I'll tell you, Sean McDermott is a butt-kicking coach.
Yeah.
Then there's the cerebral guys like the McDaniel in Miami, McDonald in Seattle, even the guy in Green Bay. Who's, by the way,
Do those guys have the staying power of the ass kickers, though?
I don't know. I'm just trying to get what's right for this team. This team is clearly undisciplined.
This guy, again, I'll listen to that. I don't know that I agree with it, but 3 wins is 3 wins when you expect it to be much better. And penalties, turnovers, those come back to the coach usually.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get around 3 wins. Like, there's no way that doesn't fall on Kevin Stefanski. I would say the same thing with penalties. You're exactly right, Dave. Those fall on the coach, and it's about discipline. It's about attention to detail. And I will say, I have no doubt that they're coaching those things, right? They're coaching to line up correctly. I've watched Kevin Stefanski practices. I know there is attention to detail. I don't think that's the reason. But again, it falls on the coach, and I'm not trying to explain that away from Kevin Stefanski. The turnovers, I don't know about that, because Nick Chubb, the ball gets punched away from behind. They tell the guys to protect the ball. The punt returner drops the punt. He muffs the punt. I mean, that one I don't necessarily blame on Stefanski, but 3-11 in the penalties, I certainly do. Where I quibble with Tony's argument is, I think the butt kicker part of it, I think fans tend to fall in love with that kind of guy. But I don't think that's necessarily the most successful coach. And I don't think that matters. I think if you're smart, that's good enough. If you design a good game plan, if guys follow you, that's more important than if you come off as macho man. Sean McVay doesn't come across that way. Andy Reid doesn't come across that way to me. Kyle Shanahan doesn't come across that way. I'm not sure Bill Belichick had a hard edge to him. But I don't know if he came across that way to me either, right? Dan Campbell is Dan Campbell. But I don't know if the other great coaches in the league necessarily fall under that. I mean, John Harbaugh doesn't strike me like that. Maybe Mike Tomlin does. My point is, you can win either way, and I don't think that is a reason to fire any coach, let alone Kevin Stefanski.
Well, and again, you got to be who you are, because players can spot so the guys that are tough guys, if you're a tough guy, be a tough guy. Kevin Stefanski as a tough guy wouldn't work. That just wouldn't work. All right, before we go to break, some updates, which not really any updates. No update on JOK. They will update when appropriate. Not going to play this week. Scott, the longer this goes on with JOK, the more concerned you get. And I don't think they're hiding anything. I think they really don't know. And that's probably as concerning as anything, because that's a guy that the defense is different when he's on the field.
Yeah, they've missed him. There's no doubt about that. You think about that play in Denver where they hit the 93-yarder down the middle, and Jordan Hicks is trying to run with the receiver, and that would be JOK running with him. And who knows if that changes that play and it changes the game. They did well against Kelsey, but he'd be a guy on Kelsey. You just see it week in and week out. He's probably their 3rd best defensive player. So they certainly miss him. There's no doubt. I think why they have not been able to give a really definitive update is because of the nature of the injury. It's a neck injury. So in order to come back from that, you have to get approval. I think that's the kind of thing that changes, and it gets better to the point where, okay, now the doctors say, yes, you can do A, B, and C to test it. And it feels like JOK isn't at that point yet where anybody can say when he might return. So it's a terrible injury. Who knows if and when he'll be able to come back? It's not going to be this year. I mean, there's 3 games left. But at some point, it'd be nice, and I think the Browns feel the same way, if they had some clarity about it and were able to say, yes, we feel like JOK is going to be able to play next year. But you really never know when it's that kind of a neck injury.
Scott Patrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Ted.
Hi, Betty.
I know you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries home for the holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick from the Chronicle Telegram as well as BrownZone.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hello, this is Tom from Sydney, and I think the Browns lost for a very simple reason. Kansas City had better players who played better, especially evident on the offensive line, which wasn't able to contain the defensive line of Kansas City. Thanks for taking my call. Have a nice day. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, I mean, that's absolutely true. They also had 6 turnovers, but to his point, a lot of sacks. So, yeah, they had better players on that day.
Well, they have a better quarterback every day, and that makes a huge deal. And to me, it showed up in the turnovers. Obviously, Mahomes didn't throw an interception, and I would, quibble with the caller a little bit. I thought the Browns offensive line was not great yesterday, and Winston, I think, was sacked 5 times. Mahomes was running for his life all day. I think the Browns had 12 quarterback hits. That doesn't count pressures that don't turn into hits. Mahomes is able to get away from those. I mean, the Browns wound up knocking him out of the game with that ankle sprain. I thought the Browns offensive line wasn't good. I thought it was better than Kansas City's offensive line, but Mahomes made the difference. He didn't take the sacks that Winston did, and he didn't throw the interceptions that Winston did. And that was a difference in the game. And Mahomes is an all-time great. He only threw for, I think, 175 yards. And 2 of the touchdowns came on short fields. But that's all he needed to do yesterday to win that game because Winston and the rest of the turnovers were so bad.
So Myles Garrett poked in the eye, missed some time during the game, came back and played. I know you wrote an article. Take us through the article that you wrote on that.
Yeah, I mean, it wound up not having any real impact on the game, except for I take that back. The touchdown, the play it happened on, the Chiefs wound up scoring a touchdown. Myles Garrett stops rushing because he gets poked in the eye. Who knows if he winds up getting him a home, so changing that play. Plus, it could have been called a penalty. Myles Garrett thought it should have been called a penalty because it's hands to the face. Obviously, the guy pokes him in the eye. So that was a pivotal play in the game. But Myles winds up coming back, only misses 4 plays, played at a high level. But just everything else about that incident. He said he took off the visor right before that play, and he wears the visor to protect his eyes because he had LASIK. And when you have LASIK, you don't want the flap going back up or coming down. I don't know. I haven't had LASIK. But you got to be careful of your eyes. So it got too blurry with the rain, so he takes it off and then gets poked in the eye. He thought it was the first play without the visor. So that's weird. Just the reaction where he turns his back to the play, throws off his helmet, drops to the ground and puts his face in the ground. I don't know if I've seen a reaction like that, which just shows you the pain that any kind of eye injury can cause. Goes to the locker room with the towel on his face, comes back, only misses 4 plays. Said he was having double vision. He could only line up on one side of the line because if he looked the other way, he couldn't really see. The eye was swollen, looked like almost like a boxer. It was red when we talked to him after the game. So it was just a lot going on there. And then part of it is Myles comes back to play, which shows how much he really cares about playing. And I know people used to question about that, with him. And I hope that discussion has gone away because he plays through a whole bunch of stuff. I think he's made his commitment more than obvious to anybody who's paying attention. And then the last nugget is he's still stuck at 99.5 because every time he got close to Patrick Mahomes, he wasn't able to bring him down.
All right. So I mentioned 6 turnovers in the game yesterday. So Browns -6 against Chiefs. And that's really been the story not only this year, last 2 years. They've been among the worst in the league. So take a look at this. This is the worst turnover margin this season. Raiders are -17. They play tonight. Browns -16, Jaguars and Titans -13. Those are the teams that are at the bottom of the barrel rankings, or record-wise. Opposite end of the spectrum, Bills and Steelers are +18, and the Texans are +13. Those are the top three teams. So when you look at the difference between the Browns and the Bills and the Steelers, that equates to 34 additional possessions for the Bills and the Steelers. Scott, that's, a 17-game season. That's 2 extra possessions a game just built on the turnover margin. That's why it's like 72 or 78% of the teams that win the turnover battle win the game, because they get extra possessions.
Yeah, it's huge. Now, if they get extra possessions and you subtract possessions because you're not scoring on those, obviously, it's such a huge stat. And that's why Stefanski talks about it all the time. Now, on its own, it's an incredibly important statistic. You also have to factor in bad teams turn the ball over sometimes because they're bad, because they have bad quarterback play, because they're always losing and trying to catch up. So there's a little of a chicken and the egg there, and I think the same thing applies with good teams. If you're the Steelers and the Bills and you're up by 20 in the fourth quarter and the other team's throwing a bunch, then that leads to turnovers. So it's not always self-contained, but the stat in itself is the number one stat in football, and the Browns they're just bad at it, and it doesn't end, but it starts and almost ends with the quarterback play.
Yep, and it was the same thing last year as well. They were near the bottom of the league last year as well. All right, before we go to break, quick takeaways from every Week 15 game, ESPN.com. For the Browns, will the Browns make a change at quarterback? Jameis Winston breathed life into Cleveland's offense, but he was benched in the fourth quarter. His fourth multi-interception game in 7 starts. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is unproven. They point out he's a 5th-round pick. Most surprising performance, Jerome Ford recorded 104 scrimmage yards, 62 of them, though, on 1 touchdown run. Marked Ford's first 100-yard game this season, first since Week 7 of 2023. Eye-popping stat, and you alluded to this, Scott. Browns defense pressured Patrick Mahomes 21 times before he left late in the fourth quarter because of an ankle injury, tied for the most pressures Mahomes has faced in a game this season. The Ford thing is interesting. He definitely has the ability to break away and put together. But, man, down in and down out, it's a lot of 1 yards, 2 yards, and no yards. And I don't know if you can live with that as a 1A ball carrier.
Yeah, it's not consistent enough. And I think he's been better this year, but it's still not perfect on some of those stretch plays where, he goes toward the sideline and I don't think he cuts it up fast enough and they turn into bigger losses than they should be. But he has the explosion. And he's still young. There's no doubt about that. But it feels like the perfect role for him is kickoff returner and that second back that can play on third down. Because he's pretty good in blitz protection. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, and he gives you that home run ability. But I'm with you. I don't think you can count on him as the number one. I mean, he was the number one for most of last year. And he was fine, but not great. The run game obviously dropped off without Chubb in there. So I feel like that's his role, or that's his best role, which is why I said earlier, if you can't count on Chubb to be the one and you don't think Ford's the number one, then you have to do something to that position.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we're going to talk a little bit about Jerry Jeudy. Continues to perform pretty well. Sports4CLE, I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to Go Forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrek, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave. Great show. Howard from Marin County. Just a couple points about the game. Number one, Joey Judy reminds me a lot of Paul Warfield. You might want to run some tape. Number two, DTR is not the answer. And one thing about Jameis Winston, you get the good and the bad. You can get touchdowns and interceptions. With DTR, he can't throw the ball. You're not going to see beautiful throws to Jerry Judy. I would not waste my time with him. Maybe the Browns should stop looking for a unicorn and, win on defense and a great line and a great running game. I would probably focus on improving the line and getting a great back, because I think getting, the quarterback is like finding a unicorn. Thanks a lot, Dave. Great show. Bye.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, finding a quarterback for the Browns has been like finding a unicorn. Other franchises have done better. Jerry Judy's been really good. Paul Warfield, you're talking Hall of Famer. I get it. He runs really good routes and is pretty good with the ball in his hands, at least from what we've seen with him.
Yeah, I think the body type might work there too, from a comparison standpoint. He's not the biggest guy. He looks skinny up close. Knock on wood for the Browns. He's avoided injuries this year, and he's got the ball in his hands a bunch. So, yeah, he's been a pleasant surprise. Dave, I didn't think he was a number one, and now he looks like he's got number one numbers. There's no doubt about that. And if the Browns believe he can be the number one, or is the number one, then it changes your priorities in the offseason. You can do things differently. So that's a huge development, I think, for this organization, this roster. I agreed with pretty much everything the caller said, except you can't just punt on the quarterback. You got to try to find that unicorn. Now, you don't have to put it all on the unicorn's shoulders, right? You can go to a running game and build around a good defense, but you always have to be in pursuit of that quarterback. Doesn't mean you take him in the top 5. Doesn't mean you have to pay him $1 billion out of the gate, but you need that guy.
Yeah, you have to find a quarterback without question. And I'm not saying if you have the 6th or 7th pick or even the 3rd pick, if you don't like any of the quarterbacks, don't draft a quarterback. If you aren't certain that this is the guy, don't waste a high pick on a quarterback. The other thing I'd say is go find somebody hire somebody to evaluate quarterbacks, because everybody else seems to be able to find one. We haven't been able to find one.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, David. I got 2 points. I think it's a fascinating discussion. Like, say the Browns are, I'm just throwing it out there, number 5, and say Cam Ward is there at 5, but they don't love Cam Ward. I think that's an interesting discussion, whether or not you still take a shot at him, because you only get in the top 10 so often, and you need a quarterback, and you got one on a rookie contract, which is huge for the situation the Browns are in, or do you take a left tackle you love and figure out the quarterback situation a different way? I think that's a really interesting discussion. And the second part of that, okay, which I lost my train of thought. What was the second part of that, Dave?
How you got to find them. You have to find them some way.
Right. Now, that's a fact. I mean, you do, whether that's a draft, whether it's free agency, whether it's trades. I mean, the draft strikes me as the easiest way to find one, but that's such a crapshoot as well. We've seen that over and over again. About evaluating. This team, or this current regime, has not, the only quarterback gets drafted is DTR.
Right.
So we don't know exactly how they evaluate the guys. We know, they screwed up the Watson, but I think a lot of teams would have screwed up the Watson evaluation given what he did in Houston. My inclination would be to trust Kevin Stefanski. Get a guy that he believes can run his system and trust him to pick the quarterback.
Yeah. Again, I can live with that, assuming that what Jimmy Haslam said a couple weeks ago stands true, and it's going to be Stefanski and Barry. I'm with you. All right, Jerry Jeudy. Take a look at this. So 108 yards against Chiefs. Second, he secured his first career 1,000-yard receiving season. So his 2024 stats, 111 targets, 70 receptions, 1,052 yards, 4 touchdowns. Currently 4th in the NFL in receiving, behind only Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb. So that's pretty elite. Though, but again, those are the guys he was drafted around as well. The other thing is, relative to the Browns, there's chance that he finishes the season with the second most receiving yards in franchise history. He's 198 off of Amari Cooper's 2023 season, 237 off of Braylon Edwards' 2007 seasons with 3 games to go. And this will tell you how much this franchise has struggled with wide receivers, Scott. He already has the 11th most receiving yards in franchise history with 1,052. So there have only been, it's like 14 1,000-yard receiving seasons in franchise history, which that's ridiculous in the modern NFL when you think about it.
Well, it is, and I'm pretty sure Amari Cooper last year was the first guy to go back-to-back 1,000 in franchise history, which, you look at a string of receivers anywhere, and you see that time and again. So, yeah, it is something. But when Judy's on a list with Chase, Lamb, and Justin Jefferson, that's pretty impressive. And again, I did not see that coming. I'm not sure the Browns saw it coming. I'm really not. I don't think they forecasted him as the number one guy who's going to be a Pro Bowler. They signed with that extension, and now it looks like crazy team-friendly extension. At the time, it looked like maybe they're overpaying for a number 2, but he's shown that all that confidence he had in himself and what he did at Alabama. I mean, he's a Bolinokoff winner at Alabama. He's the best receiver in the country, and he's a 15th pick in the draft. He's shown that all that was legit, and that maybe he was right when he said the Broncos wasted his talent with all the quarterback and coaching changes he had to go through.
Well, it's going to be interesting because we saw a significant increase with Winston relative to Watson. What happens if they go to DTR? Does his production still that's going to be something to kind of pay attention to moving forward?
Oh, there's no doubt. And again, that's one of the reasons why, if you want to make the argument to stay with Winston, it's, hey, let's keep having Jerry Jeudy produce, and that Winston can get him the ball. But if they make the switch to DTR, that's the number one thing I would watch, is how is he able to keep him involved? Because it's clear that Jeudy can continue to get open. It's just a matter of the quarterback getting him the ball. And I think that would be job number 1 for DTR.
Scott Petrek and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrek from the Chronicle Telegram as well as brownzone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, everyone. For me, when I saw James Hudson and an injured and poorly conditioned DeJuan Jones starting at the tackle positions way back on week 1, it felt like we were in deep trouble from the get-go. AB gambled on Wills and Conklin being ready week 1, and that in part contributed to a lost season. There's plenty of other factors that cost us, but a bad O-line equals a bad team. Defenses can just destroy a team's ability to function and control a game. Need some youthful talent out of this O-line, maybe this year's draft. Thanks, guys.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, the challenge with DeJuan Jones is the knee injury. Big guy, takes a while to get in shape. And yeah, the offensive line, that without question, the quarterback play was so subpar. I don't think anybody saw that. Well, I didn't see that coming. I won't say I don't think anybody saw that coming.
Yeah, it's tough. You certainly, when you look at the tackle situation, it wasn't good enough at the beginning of the season. I think it's a lot better since Jack Conklin's gotten in there. I think even Jermaine Ifedi has calmed things down on the left side since he's been there. Not perfect, but you had Wills in and out of the lineup, then you had Jones, and then Jones gets hurt. So I think right now the line is fine. And I get the caller's point. It just wasn't at the beginning of the year. Now, I will give Andrew Berry a little bit of a break. He signed Ifedi. He signed Akeem Adeniji, who was hurt, lost for the season in the preseason. So he had those two veteran guys who have started in this league at tackle, in addition to Conklin, Jones, Wills, and Hudson. So that's 6 guys for 2 spots. I think they felt like it was enough, and especially because, Jones started practicing in whatever, OTAs or minicamp. They thought Wills would be back sooner than he was. So I can understand why the Browns thought they had enough depth, but then everything went wrong. And if you want to blame the GM for that, I get it. And they didn't have enough depth as it turned out. But I think they thought, or I know that was a priority, was adding guys. And they thought they added the 2 guys in Ifedi and Adeniji. And then it turns out Adeniji wasn't available. And then Wills and Jones and Conklin all dealt with injuries.
Yeah, the offensive line was a mess. The preseason, when you're at 3 and how many ever losses it is, I've lost count, to be honest with you.
11.
Everything needs to be re-examined. How you prepare, what training camp looks like, what you do in the preseason, everything needs to be examined and probably adjusted as well. Week 15 takeaways for every NFL team from the Bleacher Report. For the Browns, they say the Browns need a special teams makeover. Dustin Hopkins has made just 64% of his attempts. They tried Riley Patterson yesterday. Kicking woes just a part of it. They mentioned Tony and Prochet. The other thing I would say, kick and punt coverage teams have broken down at different times. So special teams have been a disaster, just pretty much like everything else.
Yeah, I mean, there's about 1.5 bright spots. Corey Bojorquez has kicked the ball great, the punter for the most part. The coverage hasn't been great, but he's kicked it great, I would say, all year long. And Jerome Ford has 2 good returns the last 2 games. But outside of that, it has been a disaster. They made the change to Bubba Ventrone 2 years ago. It made sense to me. He's a highly respected coach, special teams coach in this league. We know him as a special teams ace with the Patriots, with the Browns, with the 49ers. But they haven't had any huge returns, besides maybe the Ford one a week ago that I can remember. They've given up too many big ones. They've had too many mistakes. And, it's just bad football. And it's bad football on special teams where is a chance for you to shift that margin, right? You're trying to win on the margins, and that's an opportunity to do it. And the Browns have not they've not been good in that area, and they've lost on those margins, and it's really hurt this team. And I'm not blaming it all on Ventrone, but like we talked about with Stefanski, he's the guy in charge of that unit, and it just hasn't been good enough.
So this from the Bleacher Report. Every team's move to make before Week 16. For the Browns, they say poach Frank Gore Jr. from the Bills practice squad. Nick Chubb's broken foot leaves vacancy in the Browns' backfield for the final 3 games. Signing Frank Gore Jr. to the active roster would give him a look at a younger back who could be part of the solution next season. I'm not going to tell you I've seen a lot of Frank Gore Jr., who's been on the Bills practice squad, but I like the idea of going out and signing a guy you like and want to look at from somebody's practice squad.
Yeah, I do too, and that position makes a lot of sense. That's also a position where if you're able to evaluate him and you're building for the final 2 or 3 games, I think you might be able to glean some valuable information there. I'm not sure you could say that about every position. I think running back, you can kind of plug and play and see if he could be part of that, part of the solution, part of the rotation next year.
So along those lines, before I let you go, this is from the Bleacher Report as well. Every team's move to make in 2025 free agency. Browns, they say, add Jaylen Warren, running back from the Steelers. Warren's shown signs he could be a good lead back or a high-end receiving back. Either way, he's taking a back seat to Najee Harris. That's an intriguing name. Warren's got a little bit of speed. Do you think he's redundant to what they have in James Ford? That would be my question.
I don't think it's redundant. I see the comparison, and there are similarities. I've liked Warren since he got to Pittsburgh. You watch Najee Harris carry the ball, and then they go to Warren, and it's a big change, just the explosiveness that Warren brings. I've liked him, but I'll tell you this. We're sitting in the press box in Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago, and I said that, I think it's Zach Jackson. I said, I've always loved this guy. I wonder what his roster situation is. Well, he's going to be a restricted free agent. So, I don't know how that works. I know Pittsburgh tries to keep him. I don't know how much, that would seem to be a little more expensive, maybe than the Browns would be willing to go. But if money weren't an option or the Steelers don't keep him, I like him a lot, and I think he would be a fit.
Scott Petrak, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. He is the Browns beat reporter for the Chronicle-Telegram. You can also check him out at brownzone.com. We're going to continue talking Browns. Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Ted.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries Home for the Holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation. I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Well, at 3-11, I hear the same thing from our two-time Coach of the Year. We can't turn the ball over. We can't do penalties. We got to get better, but he says it every week. And again, as I keep saying, he does nothing about it. You wonder sometimes if they even practice. How many times are we going to have before the play even starts? The guy can't even line up right. And we got punters going offside and going down too early. That's coaching, and it all comes to him. And then you got a different guy returning the ball for kicks and punts every week. And what does he do? He fumbles. If there was consistency with him, we'd be consistently bad. But there's no consistency with him, and we're bad. Thanks, guys.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Let's welcome in Spencer German, 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Browns on SI. So that's one of our callers from Rochester, Spencer. Now, the thing that I find interesting is he wants players to be held accountable, yet when punt returners are held accountable and he pulls them, we're just changing things to change things. There's not a whole lot of defending anything that goes on with a 3-11 team. You can't. I could defend it, but I can find fault with every aspect of it pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as the caller did, even though I do appreciate any caller from my hometown of Rochester, New York. But I don't think it's that they're not changing things. I think we've seen Kevin Stefanski and this coaching staff try some different things. Whether it be, again, Kadarius Toney had the rough week, returning punts a couple weeks back, and then it was James Prochet, and now he muffed a punt. So I think some of this stuff is just kind of compounded on top of itself, and the issues that have plagued this team all year have continued and persisted. I think honestly, like after the game on Sunday, Juan Thornhill, I think described the sort of state of this team best, where he just said like they can't seem to get a game where everybody plays together. The offense maybe has a good game, but then the defense is giving up too many big plays and they lose. Or the defense has a good game like yesterday, and the offense can't score. Like it's just been this ongoing problem where one unit takes a step forward and the other one takes 2 steps back, and then that unit takes a step forward and the other one takes 2 steps back. I think special teams has been the one unit that's been pretty much universally bad the entire season. But like it's hard because I understand where a lot of this is always going to fall on the head coach's feet. But I do think he's tried some different things and it just hasn't worked, and circumstances have kind of led to where we are. I know people are maybe fed up and there's 3 weeks to go and they feel like it's rock bottom, but I'm at a place with Stefanski where I'm okay with him coming back next year and getting a shot to sort of remedy things, because we've seen his teams also be very disciplined and be successful with a different set of circumstances around them.
Yeah, I am with you, and I feel like we're in the minority with I am fine with Stefanski and Barry coming back. But again, I certainly understand people who have the opposing position. This was a team that we expected to be a playoff team, and they're closer to being the top pick in the draft than a playoff team, much closer. I know you wrote an article, key takeaways from the loss to the Chiefs. So we'll break them down. We got 6 of them. We'll go 3 and 3. Can't blame the defense. The power of running the football, which is another one that's key. And the season of giving. And we showed earlier, Browns are second worst team turnover differential to the Raiders. They're minus 16 already this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's been one of the biggest problems, on top of the fact that while they're turning the ball over, they're not really creating enough turnovers on the defensive side. And we know that's been a problem this year. You know, Denzel Ward's talked about it. Other guys in the secondary have talked about it. Last couple of weeks, it felt like Denzel was actually making some of those plays, and that was obviously encouraging. But yeah, like that's another area where problems persist, right? And it doesn't help that, I mean, I listen, Deshaun Watson, when the offense was under his command, was awful. But the one thing he didn't do was have like an excessive amount of turnovers. And now that's just gotten worse with Jameis Winston. And it's kind of just par for the course. Like, you know what you signed up for with Jameis Winston. This team knew what they signed up for with Jameis Winston. You get the good with the bad. Unfortunately, in a game like Sunday, there was more bad than good. Like you didn't get a nearly 500-yard performance that could kind of help mask, you know, some of the bad that was out there and make you feel at least good about a game. Like that Broncos game, he throws 2 pick sixes, but you turn the TV off after that one, and you're like, well, hey, you know, they put up a good fight. They had a quarterback who threw for almost 500 yards. He just threw a couple to the other team, and you can kind of, I don't want to say live with the result, but you at least like enjoyed the football game. Yesterday, it was just all the bad from Jameis. And so, yeah, I think there's just too much inconsistency there. You're not going to win a lot of games, as Kevin Stefanski said, when you turn the ball over 6 times. And that's going to be a major point of emphasis for this team moving forward, which is part of the reason why I don't know for sure that it's definitive that Jameis Winston's back next year, because they just can't afford to give the football away as much as they have this season.
Defense actually played pretty well, all things considered.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you on that one. As I kind of wrote about in the piece that you sort of highlighted, I want to see if I can find these real quick. There was like a number of stats I wrote down. They forced 6 3-and-outs. They only gave up one long scoring drive for the entire game. It was that 14-play, 87-yard drive in the second quarter. 14 of the Chiefs' 21 points came after turnovers that gave them a short field. Kansas City only had 311 yards of total offense. They were 7 of 18 on third down. That's not terrible. It's only like a 39 conversion percentage. And Patrick Mahomes he completed 50% of his passes and 1 touchdown. Like they kept that game like they've kind of done all year. The Chiefs have played so many one-score games. It wasn't like they blew the doors off the Browns, but the way the game played out, because there were so many turnovers, it felt like they blew the doors off the Browns, weirdly enough. So yeah, it was an interesting situation how it all kind of went down. And the defense, I thought, gave them a chance, and that's kind of been the story this season. There's been games where the defense has given them a chance, especially early on this season, and the offense just couldn't do anything with it. And the results are, again, a team that's now 3-11 because they haven't been able to get all those phases to play together.
All right, so the other 3 key takeaways from that article: Scary Jerry Jeudy, again, pretty good. Has, I believe it's now the 11th best receiving season in Browns history. Not so special teams. We kind of touched on that a little bit earlier as well. And are you happy now? DTR gets some playing time. You know what? The thing that I'm curious with, Spencer, and I'm going to tie 2 of these together: DTR getting playing time and Jerry Jeudy. I'm curious to see, can Jerry Jeudy be a threat if it's DTR? Because there was a marked improvement when you went from Watson to Winston. Watson to Winston.
Yeah, it's a good point. I know Kevin was kind of asked about that today, like this idea that how much stock does he put in the fact that guys like Jerry Jeudy, guys like Elijah Moore looked better or had their games elevated by Jameis Winston being out there. So I don't think that can be understated. I think that's an important sort of note here going into next week. But yeah, like it's Jerry's been, I think, phenomenal this year. I'm not saying this was like the hottest take ever. I think a lot of people were sort of in this camp with me, but I threw out there before the season started, I thought he could get 1,000 yards this year. Some of that came from he seemed to have really good chemistry with Deshaun Watson during training camp, and that's obviously continued in twofold with Jameis Winston throughout the last however many games they played since week 8 now. I've kind of lost track here. I guess it's week 15, so they played 7 games. But yeah, or 6 games. But yeah, I just it's been phenomenal to watch. And I do think that the Browns, as they enter an offseason with a lot of questions, particularly at the quarterback position, I do think they at least have one answer in the form of, we know we have a really good wide receiver in Jerry Jeudy who could potentially be our number 1 guy. And maybe you just have to find somebody to sort of play the Robin to his Batman in this offense and kind of be on your way once you sort out the quarterback position. But yeah, assuming DTR is going to be starting this weekend and maybe beyond, and given that Kevin Stefanski remains non-committal, it feels like that's going to be the move, because last week he told you straight up that he wasn't making a change of quarterback and that James was still the guy. I'm curious to see what Jerry Jeudy's numbers look like with somebody like Dorian Thompson-Robinson out there under center.
Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Browns on SI, and I are going to take one more time out, other side of the break. We'll continue talking Browns. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Ted.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries Home for the Holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, as well as Cleveland Browns on SI.com. So, Spencer, Nick Chubb's future. So he broke his foot. We know not going to play the rest of the year. Not under contract. He wants to come back, and it sounds like the Browns want him back. What do you think happens with Nick Chubb?
Yeah, I'm glad we're getting a chance to get into this, because I do think this is going to be one of the big storylines going into this offseason, even if people think, Nick Chubb's not going to be the same player ever again or whatever, because listen, like there's a couple reasons why I think the door is very much still open for a return. One of them is what you mentioned, Dave. Like Nick Chubb, literally just last week. Like the timing of all this couldn't have been more ironic, I guess, in that way, where he gets hurt and it's a season-ending injury, and now we're having this conversation because just last week he said he wants to retire Brown. It's important to him to finish his career where he started. We know how much Cleveland means to him. He wrote that great piece in the Players Tribune about how it was the fans who really helped him get through the rehab from the knee injury last year and got him back out on the field. And I'm sure that'll be the case again, with this injury where he'll rehab and get back on the field and the fans will be sort of a driving force behind it. So we know he loves it here. We know he wants to be here. I think as disappointing as the injury is, it does probably help the Browns from a financial standpoint be able to afford somebody like Chubb. It's not like they have to break the bank to pay somebody like Nick, who is now coming off of another season-ending injury where there was already some questions about like how much more time does he need to kind of get right or get back to being some version of himself from before. And so I think that kind of helps their cause if they're not trying to overspend this offseason or they have limited cash to spend. They can probably get Nick Chubb at a decent value. And maybe they give him a little bit extra because he's Nick Chubb and they appreciate him and they love him. The fan base loves him. And you don't want to see a guy not get paid because of injuries, but I do think it helps their cause in that way. And then the other part of this, Dave, is just, I mean, it's the easiest PR move a team can make, right? Like with the Deshaun Watson thing still looming large, the albatross of a contract that still remains with this team, and the fact that they have to sort of sort through that. And he's probably going to still be on this roster next year. We saw the report over the weekend from our colleague Mary Kay Cabot, who indicates that he will be there and he'll probably be in the mix to start and at least compete for the job and all these different things, and that they still believe he could play at a high level. Like he's going to be here next year because I just think the nature of the contract forces your hand there. And so with all that kind of hanging overhead, it's an easy thing to sell to the fan base to keep Nick Chubb on this team and give fans something to at least be excited about or root for or a positive thing. It's, again, when you're trying to put like lipstick on a pig, this is like the easiest or the cheapest thing of lipstick that you could purchase and putting Nick Chubb back out there and keeping him on this roster. So I just think it makes sense from too many different angles. And I do envision a path towards Nick Chubb still being with the Browns next year and maybe even fulfilling his wish of retiring a Cleveland Brown here at some point.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And we didn't really get to see him. From what Kevin Stefanski has said, might not require surgery on the foot, which would be good. Because you were starting to see little glimpses and little visions that he was going to get that explosion back. And that, when you undergo a knee injury of that magnitude, last thing to come back is that burst and explosion that made Nick Chubb elite. So that, I'm not saying that's not in there. Let's see if that can come back.
Yeah, there were moments, right? Like I think in Pittsburgh, there was a few really good runs. I even think yesterday against the Chiefs, the play he fumbled on that set up the touchdown drive for the Chiefs, like the short field there, it was like a 10-yard run up the middle and, carrying guys in his back. It looked like vintage Nick Chubb. And then out of nowhere, the Chiefs defender, I forget who it was at the top of my head, made a really good play and punching the ball out and, gets the ball back to the Chiefs. Nick Chubb doesn't fumble a lot. That was just kind of a fluky play. But yeah, like there was moments where you saw it, and there was kind of a general consensus these last couple weeks that maybe some people overestimated the time it was going to take for him to get right. I'm not saying that was you or that was me, but I do think there was people who thought like, oh, he'll just, once he gets back in the field, he'll be Nick Chubb again. And the history kind of shows you might need a little more time for the severity of knee injury that he had last year to get back to being yourself. And so there was a lot of optimism that he might come back next year and week one be able to kind of hit the ground running and look more like the Nick Chubb of old. Even if he can't get 100% back to who he was, 80% of that version of Nick Chubb is still pretty damn good. So I think there's some encouraging signs that he could be back next year, and maybe with now the offseason to recover from both the foot and get the knees sort of right a little bit more, he can be an even more effective player, and we'll see more of those signs in 2025.
All right, before I let you go, Jerome Ford, longest run of the season yesterday, 62 yards, is also the longest rush by any Brown this season. Spencer, Ford's it's a head scratcher because you get the big plays, you get the explosion.
Yeah.
But I think if you're trying to have a consistent running game, there's too many 1, 2, 0-yard runs that are around those big explosive runs.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think Jerome Ford has been kind of what you expect for a day 3 pick for when he got drafted, right? Like he's had the big plays like we saw against the Chiefs, the 62-yarder, but a lot of it's kind of just like in the margins, these short little runs, and he can't really he's not Nick Chubb, obviously, and nobody should be held to that standard. But yeah, like there's moments there for him. I think he's kind of proven he can be like a solid backup in this league, whether it's for the Browns or otherwise. I think there's some encouraging plays that he's made. He had the great play last year against the Jets it was a pass or it was a reception, but still a really good play that scores a touchdown and helps you win that game to clinch the playoff berth. So there's definitely been some moments with Jerome Ford. We'll see what he brings to the table in the final 3 games. I do think there was encouraging signs that Chubb was kind of getting his feet back underneath him. I think there's been some encouraging signs too that the run game is starting to figure some things out, and they're starting to have a little bit more balance with that. They put together back-to-back games with over 100 yards rushing. Sunday was their highest rushing total of the season as well. And I think you'll have a little bit more of that, especially if Dorian Thompson-Robinson's starting, because that's more of his style and game play anyway. So we'll see. But yeah, I think that's one of the big things I'll be watching the rest of the way is what type of momentum they can build in the run game moving forward into the offseason and obviously into 2025.
Spencer German, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Spencer.
Always a pleasure, Dave. Appreciate you.
Spencer German, make sure you check him out at 92.3 The Fan. You can also read him, Cleveland Browns, on SI. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.